going to call to order the Wednesday, October 19th, 2016 meeting of the Zoning Board of Appeals. May we have a roll call?
Ms. Chester? Here. Mr. Cho? Ms. McLaughlin?
Here.
Ms. Utman? Mr. Warmbrun?
Here.
Mr. Weiskopf?
Here.
And Mr. Welch?
This time we have an approval of the minutes.
I'll move that we approve the minutes from the September 21st, 2016 meeting as presented in the draft.
It's been so moved. Do we have a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Those minutes are approved. Are there any written communications? Any continued public hearings? Then at this time I would call for hearing ZBA 2016 minimum-03. May we have a staff report?
Do we have the applicant available by phone, as was arranged? Jason?
Hello?
Oh, Robert?
Yes, I'm here.
Hello, okay. The applicant is out of the area at the this evening, so he is listening and will be able to communicate by telephone. So. So this is a request by Beverlinda Chempong of Kids Campus CDC for a minor variance to allow a reduction in the amount of required off-street parking from 17 spaces to 13 spaces at 1101 East Colorado Street in the R5 medium-high density multiple family residential district. The applicant's husband, Robert, is available by phone. It should be noted that he should, after I'm done speaking, and if you would like to speak with the applicant, that he will have to be sworn in as well. So, earlier this year in ZBA case 2016 CO1, the applicant was granted a conditional use permit for a daycare facility at the subject property. Let me just go down to. So the applicant was granted a conditional use permit to allow for a daycare facility at the subject property in the southeast portion of Urbana. The applicant has stated that the staffing requirements for daycare facilities are standards made by the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services. They're based on several factors, including the age range, the age groups of the children, the group size, as well as the amount of physical space. There are various requirements for ratios of children to staff members or limits of group sizes, etc., that determine the amount of staff members that are necessary for a daycare facility. The requirement for parking, off-street parking for a daycare facility in the Urbana zoning ordinance is 3 off-street parking spaces for every 2 employees of the facility, as well as a drive-through aisle that would allow for the arrival and pickup and drop-off of children. This facility does have an existing drive-through aisle, and it has 13 available off-street parking spaces. The applicant has stated that they will need as many, or that the current parking allows them to have as many as 8 employees. The state requirements for to be licensed indicate that the daycare must be in compliance with local zoning and code requirements, and therefore they would be limited in the amount of children that they'd be able to accommodate for the site to be a successful business and financially viable. They would like to accommodate more children, but the amount of children they would like to accommodate to allow them to be successful at the site would require as many as 11 employees, and which would therefore require 17 parking spaces. So they're asking for a minor variance for a reduction from 17 to 13. Just to quickly review over the site, the building was constructed in the early 70s, in which it received an original conditional use permit to operate as also a daycare facility in Plan Case 820. The existing parking lot was put in place at that time with 14 spaces. That's one less space than there is now, mainly because there wasn't space taken up for an extra handicap space. So that parking lot has been in continuous existence for the property's state since it's been developed. The property was granted a conditional use permit to operate as a professional business office in 2005, in case 2005 CO2. During that case, it also received a minor variance for a reduction in the required off-street parking spaces from 18 spaces to 14 in ZBA case 2005 minor 02. It should be noted that because the building was the professional business office use was discontinued, so when the use is discontinued, the variance for parking tied to that use is discontinued as well. There are different parking requirements for a professional business office versus a daycare facility. So that the conditional use permit for the current daycare facility was passed with several conditions relating that it meet applicable regulations, site plan conformity, and that the parking lot be restriped. I'll just quickly go over the zoning of the property and the uses. The property itself is zoned R5. It is surrounded by R5 and R6, or I'm sorry, R5 to the west, which are apartments. R6 and B3 to the east, which are also apartments. To the south, you have, you go further south, there are some single-family homes. You go north, those are B3 properties, and those are also apartments. The South Philo Road corridor is just a block, 2 blocks to the east. So the applicant states that they need more employees than the current parking would allow for their business to be viable. They state that the number of employees would need to be as many as 11. They state that the parking needs for their business would not be as many as the zoning ordinance would require. They state that their daycare would be employing people from the nearby neighborhood, that some of their employees would be more likely to walk to work, or some would be more likely to take public transit, some of which is nearby on Philo Road because of the bus lines that run through there. They also state that the staffing needs would rarely have a full capacity of as many as 11 employees, that there would be some overlap, but the number of employees might vary throughout the day depending on, the number of children in the morning versus mid or late afternoon. They state that the most amount of children they'd have would be late afternoon after school gets out. But they also state that the property was also designated to be used as a daycare and for use before the current zoning ordinance was put in place, before lots of regulations for daycares, even at the state level, were likely put in place that required them to have as many employees and subsequently as many parking spaces as required by the city. The building did operate as a professional, or I'm sorry, I should say that the applicant also did attempt to contact nearby businesses that were within several blocks of the subject property, the apartment building to the north as well, to coordinate an alternative arrangement for overflow parking or for off-site parking spaces, but they were unable to find a willing participant to work out such an agreement. The property was used for about 8 or 9 years for the purpose of a professional business office, in which it was only required to have 14 spaces as opposed to 18. Staff was not aware of any parking issues on the site when it was from when it was used as a daycare center before that, or when it was used as an office. Also, the variance would not really be changing any physical parts of the property in terms of the building footprint or the parking lot. It would not be including any of the space for the drive off, the drive aisle used for dropping off and picking up children. That would remain unchanged, and there would not be any parking that would obstruct that area. So that being an important function for the daycare would remain the same as well. So for the criteria for the variance, are there any special circumstances or special practical difficulties with reference to the parcel concerned in carrying out the strict application of the ordinance? The variance is being requested due to parking areas that were constructed before the current zoning ordinance or current state daycare regulations. The amount of parking would restrict the number of employees that would allow the applicant to have a business that would be financially viable at that site. The second criteria, the proposed variance will not serve as a special privilege because the variance requested is necessary due to special circumstances relating to the land or structure involved, or to be used for occupancy thereof, which is generally not applicable to other lands or structures in the same district. The parking lot was pre-existing to the current use and cannot be reasonably expanded because of the location of the building, the location of the drop-off drive aisle as well. There was also a previous minor variance that was granted for the same purpose. And the building was constructed, in the 70s for a same use daycare facility with the same number of parking spaces that there are currently. The third criteria that the variance was requested was not the result of a situation or condition having been knowingly or deliberately created by the petitioner. The lot was platted and the building was constructed before the current zoning ordinance. The applicants don't really have much control over the staffing requirements that are required by the state. Number 4, that the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. The daycare is intended to serve serve people and employ people in the surrounding neighborhood who are very easily able to walk or bike to work or take the transit nearby as opposed to driving. The fifth criteria, that the variance will not cause a nuisance to the adjacent property. Most of the adjacent properties are multifamily residential in use. The daycare would not be of significant disruption to traffic, and the drop-off area would still remain uninterrupted with the requested variance. And then the sixth criteria, that the variance represents generally the minimum deviation from requirements of the zoning ordinance to accommodate the request. The request is for the reduction in required parking amount simply to match already the existing the existing parking lot, and also just one less space than an amount previously approved. So the options for this case are to approve the variance as requested, approve with certain terms and conditions, or if the board elects to add conditions, they should articulate findings accordingly, or may deny the variance. If so, should articulate the findings accordingly. Therefore, the staff recommendation is that the board approve the minor variance with the requirement that adequate bicycle parking is installed as required by the zoning ordinance. It should be noted that it makes a reference to the city council. This is a minor variance. It does not it is not forwarded to the city council for approval. Therefore, the vote by the board is the final vote for this. If you approve it, then the variance is approved. It does not get forwarded to city council. That was an oversight. I apologize for that. But the applicant is available over the phone to answer any questions. First, did you have any questions that I could answer?
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
Can you explain to me the rationale behind the, I guess it's basically 1.5 parking spaces per employee, 2 for 3?
Those were parking requirements created in our zoning ordinance. I'm not certain as to when they were particularly adopted, but they're usually based on universal professionally recognized standards of appropriate parking levels for different types of uses. You'd probably have to go into the history of the adoption of when our parking requirements were enacted, which was before my time.
And then the whatever we decide upon here today, that has nothing to do with what the state is going to allow them to do, right? The state doesn't really care about the parking. That's a city issue.
The state requires that the daycare be compliant with the local code and regulations. So if the local regulations only limit them to 8 employees, then the state will not license them to accommodate any more children than, or age groups of children than 8 employees could.
Well, are we somehow here allowing them 11 employees? Are we allowing them 15 employees? The employees is what's confusing me here.
The number of parking spaces that they are requesting permission to deviate from is enough parking spaces for 11 employees.
So we would interpret that as the city would only allow them to have 11 at the maximum then?
With based on the number of spaces they're asked to be reduced from. Yes.
So if the state said they could have 13 employees, they can only have 11 because we only are dealing with this number of 17 and reducing it?
Pretty much.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? I have one. You said attempts were made to possibly lease or obtain the right to use spaces elsewhere in other businesses?
Businesses to the east and the nearby apartment buildings that also had off-street parking lots, yes.
And maybe I'll have to ask the applicant, but do you know whether attempts were made to contact the county market? That's not very far from this property, and there's a number of spaces there, correct?
Yes, we did contact them. By that time, they were open. And,
Robert?
Subsequently, it was closed. After we submitted the application, but we did, yes.
Hello, Robert.
Yes, I'm here.
Would you be able to be sworn in first? Just
Okay.
or
I'll wait and address that question.
yeah, if we'll ask you for your input in just a moment. He was directing a question to me first, so
Okay,
we'll let you know when we would like you to answer any questions. So
Okay.
I'm not aware of the applicant personally contacting the property owner of County Market or not, but
Let the applicant answer that
Okay.
question. Any other questions?
Okay.
one moment, Robert.
Anything further from staff based on the questions?
Ms. Hookman?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I guess the alternative is that they would then provide paving for 3 additional parking spaces if required. And they are trying to not cover more ground with paving material.
Yes.
I read that somewhere.
That would be possible. It would require finding more space on the property to create more parking spaces, which is a significant expenditure, no doubt. But I did just zoom in on pictures of the lot just to indicate the confines of the existing parking lot.
Any other questions for staff? Right. Thank you. Sir,
Yes.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
All right. First of all, I'm going to have to swear you in, all right?
Okay.
All right. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that any testimony you give will be true and accurate to the best of your ability?
Yes.
All right. Now, you can say anything that you want to about your application. You don't have to answer my question first. Is there anything you would like to say, or do you want to just respond to questions?
Respond to questions.
All right, then. Do you remember my question about the county market parking?
Yes, we did.
All right.
We
You
did
can
that
go
with
on from
friends,
there,
but-
sir.
Okay.
Okay,
We
go.
tried to talk to them about allowing our employees to park there. By that time, the country market was open, and we couldn't get a final conclusion with the owner of the building before we applied for the zoning variance. But then, after we applied, we heard that the place is closed now. Subsequent to the closure, we haven't contacted the landlord yet. So we didn't have any conclusive agreement with the landlord as to whether he will allow us to have an employee park in this spot. But now that the county market is closed, maybe we're more receptive to the idea.
So you're saying you could not make any agreement with the county market property owners?
No,
Okay.
because the county market at that time was opened and operational. But after we tried to, we attempted to talk to them, the county market is now closed. So we don't know how receptive you will be to the idea now that the county market is closed. But they have a lot of parking spaces there. The only next business there is Dollar Tree. They don't have much parking space there. So the county market will be the most viable place. But we haven't talked to them yet after the county market closed.
Are you still there?
Yes.
My question then is, if we approve this variance, then that would, at least for the time being, fix the number of employees that you could have at your business, correct?
Yes.
So, do you have no plans for any further expansion of your operation?
Not right now, but maybe in the future we would think about it, because we're thinking about maybe opening late. Right now we set up from 6 to 6, but we may maybe in the long run go to midnight, depending on the needs of the parents in the area. That is the only plans we have for expansion, and nothing else.
Does anybody else have any questions for the applicant? All right. Sir, again, this is final opportunity for you to say anything else you want to in regards to your application.
Yes.
Do you have anything else you'd like to say?
No.
All right, thank you. Is there any further discussion amongst?
Will you be taking public input from the rest of the audience?
Thank you. Is there anybody in the audience that wishes to speak in favor of the application? Is there anyone who wishes to speak in opposition to the application?
I want to find out a little bit. Should I come to the?
Did you? She was sworn in? Come forward, please. You have to sign your name again and.
Okay. Is it on?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I just have a question. I'm one of the folks that
Would
live.
you introduce yourself as well?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, hi, I'm Peg Santiago, and I got a letter because our property is within 250 feet of the daycare. I just wanted to find out the possible impact on the parking there in front of Steer Place, because we live in the duplexes there, and our neighbors, both east and west of us and ourselves, have 2 vehicles, and so our on-street parking is very at a premium, and there are folks, or at least have been at Steer Place, that have caregivers that also need parking spaces there. So I just wanted to find out if the reduction in or the addition of parking for the, no, it's a reduction in parking as I understand it, if that would have any impact on trying to find parking there on Harding, on the other side of the block.
Does staff have any response to that?
I think perhaps, I mean, we haven't done a parking analysis or a study as the business isn't open yet, but I think one thing is clear is that the parking requirement of requiring 3 spaces for 2 employees, and we're not really quite sure why that is such a parking requirement. That means that there is, even at full staffing at 11 employees, there are still 13 parking spaces. So there's 2 extra in addition to the drop-off area. So I think the reason we have that parking requirement so high is to help to accommodate a little extra at crunch time for drop-off and pickup. So it wouldn't be an employee issue for parking, because even if everyone that works there drives, they would still have extra parking. So potentially the crunch time would be at drop-off or pickup, and so most likely people aren't going to park 2 blocks away in order to do the drop-off. So the site would need to accommodate it in some way. I don't see a huge parking crunch there because it is so far away, and because the employees would be more than adequately served on the site. So that would be my response. I don't know if Chris has anything to add.
So then I understand that to mean that there wouldn't be any additional stress on the parking there on the other, on Harding.
I'm not sure who it would be, because the employees are more than accommodated on the site itself.
Okay.
Because the parking requirement is the parking that's there is 13 spaces when they would only at most have 11 employees. And someone doing a drop-off isn't probably going to walk around the block in order to do that.
Thank you.
Do you have any further concerns or questions?
That was the main one, because we have folks with both working in two vehicles, both on our east and on our west, and so, yeah. Okay, so thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else wish to be heard, either for or against? Anything further from the board?
I would just comment that if anyone is out of compliance, is probably Steer Place, which does not have adequate parking for all of its residents. When it was built, it did not anticipate so many of the residents having personal cars and caregivers.
Thank you. I believe we're ready to call the motion.
I move that we approve ZBA case 2016 MIN-03, the minor variance to allow a reduction in the amount of required parking from 17 spaces to 13 spaces, with the following condition: that adequate bicycle parking is installed as required by the zoning ordinance.
Been moved. Is there a second to that motion? Any further discussion? Believe then we're ready for a vote.
Ms. McLaughlin,
Yes.
Ms. Uteman,
Yes.
Mr. Warmbrun,
Yes.
Mr. Weiskopf,
Yes.
Mr. Welch,
Yes,
Ms. Chester.
Yes.
and motion carries. At this time, then I would call ZBA 2016 minimum dash 04 for hearing. May we have a staff report?
So the following is a request by Mark Allen and Carl Minch of Carmela LLC for a minor variance to allow the construction of a freestanding monument sign that encroaches 2 feet into the required 8-foot setback along University Avenue at 202 West University in the B3 General Business Zoning District. Just to quickly review, okay. In June of 2015, the City Council approved 2 major variances to allow, for the subject property, to allow the construction of a new building that encroached on the front yard setback along Race Street, as well as allowed a off-street parking spaces that would allow cars to back out into the right-of-way for the construction of a new building that would serve a professional office use as well as the use of a gaming hall. The applicants are now seeking a minor variance that would allow them to construct a freestanding monument sign on the property. Just to quickly review over the subject property, it is zoned B3 as well as its neighbors to the east and west, both of which are office buildings, which are also zoned B3 general business. To the north, you have some single-family homes and a few multifamily apartment buildings and homes that are zoned R5. Across the street, you have a vacant lot, which is zoned B3, also next to some B4 properties and businesses, and a park space that is zoned conservation, recreation, education. This is along the University Avenue corridor. I'm sorry. So the applicants have constructed a new building that is in compliant in every aspect of the zoning ordinance, except for the two items that they received major variances on. They're asking for permission to construct a freestanding sign that would encroach 2 feet into the required front yard setback. The zoning ordinance for B3 properties requires a minimum, for freestanding monument signs, requires a minimum setback of 8 feet. The applicants are proposing or requesting a variance that allows a sign to be set back 6 feet instead. The sign would be approximately 48 square feet. This is an approximate rendering of what it would look like. The sign would also be 8 feet tall, and it would be meant to advertise the location of the businesses located within the building for east and westbound traffic along University Avenue. I would like to point out that, for the record, that the applicant has indicated that the site plan in Exhibit E shows the proposed location for the sign. The applicant has actually mentioned that they would like to locate the sign 8 feet to the east, or on this site plan, 8 feet to the right of its presented location. That would still place it. That would still place it in front of the building, just more towards, a little closer towards the corner, and towards where the building sort of cuts to an angle and then goes north. But it would still be completely in the front, just 8 feet towards the east from where it shows in this diagram. So their requested reduction of the required front yard for the sign is by 2 feet, thus constituting a minor variance. The lot itself was previously is a legally non-conforming lot. It also had a building that was legally non-conforming. Previously had a building which has since been demolished and replaced with the new construction that is more into code with the current building code requirements. There was also a curb cut that was closed along University Avenue as well. So it eliminated problematic off-street parking spaces that previously existed in that space. But the lot and the building itself are on a rather tight space that was, plotted and before the current owners occupied it. Because the building is on such a tight lot, it creates very limited availability for space in which a sign could be located to provide identification and wayfinding, or mainly identification, not so much wayfinding, but mainly identification for the building from traffic along that street. They believe that the request, just a reduction, it would still be set back somewhat from the property line, being at 6 feet as opposed to 8 feet. But that extra 2 feet allows a slight bit more visibility that would help potential patrons safely identify the building if they are in traffic, or anyone looking to locate the building. Going to the variance criteria first, that there are special circumstances or practical difficulties with reference to the parcel concerned in carrying out the strict application of the ordinance. The size and configuration of the narrow corner lot, as I said earlier, leave little flexibility for placement of a monument sign. The second criteria, that the proposed variance will not serve as a special privilege because it's necessary due to special circumstances relating to the land or structure involved, or to be used for occupancy thereof, which is generally not applicable to other lands or structures in the same district. It's a corner lot with 2 required front yards, and there's also a small corner of the land which was dedicated towards the right-of-way several years ago, which further restricted the amount of available space than previously existed for placement of a sign. The characteristics and the size of the lot, the loss of space to the public right-of-way, and that unique sort of a lot being on a corner lot also are not applicable to other properties in the district or nearby properties. Number 3, that the variance requested was not the result of a situation or condition having knowingly or deliberately created by the petitioner. The lot, as mentioned earlier, was created before the current zoning ordinance requirements. The petitioners, while they did construct new construction on it, they did, by the building that the improvements that they made to the property and the building they constructed, made the property more compliant with current zoning ordinance requirements, not less. Number 4, that the variance will not alter the essential character of the neighborhood. It's located along a street and a corridor with other freestanding signs of a similar nature, so it wouldn't be disrupting the essential character. It would be pretty much matching it. Number 5, that the variance will not cause a nuisance to the adjacent property. While there are single-family homes that are north, the sign would still be located completely on the other side of the building. That would be a distance of about 132 feet as well. And both the office buildings that are to the east and to the west of the sign have vehicular access that is not on University Avenue. They rely on access from other points, so it would not interfere with traffic towards those properties either. That the 6th criteria, that the variance represents generally the minimum deviation from requirements of the zoning ordinance necessary to accommodate the request. As stated earlier, the requested deviation is 2 feet, only 2 feet closer to the right-of-way. It would enhance visibility around the buildings, but it would not deprecate too much the surrounding area, and so 2 feet is considered the minimum amount necessary by the applicant. The 3 options for the variance are to approve it. It could be approved with certain terms and conditions. If so, the board should articulate the findings, or deny the variance. If so, the findings should be articulated. The staff recommendation is that the board approve minor variance 2016 minor 04 to allow a freestanding sign that encroaches 2 feet in the 8-foot setback, with the following condition: that the site be developed in general compliance with the attached site plan and rendering, and it should be noted as well that the sign in the rendering will be 8 foot further to the east than indicated in Exhibit E. Did you have any questions?
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff?
Yes, sir. I took my tape measure and I measured from the north side of the sidewalk, 8 feet. And I could see where that sign was. Then I went across Ray Street, where you have a very nice monument sign put out by the Patel Law Firm. It's a very nice monument sign. That sign is exactly 8 feet from the north property line of the sidewalk. Exactly 8 feet. And is a very nice sign. It is very visible. And I do not see any need for a variance. Why do we have these zoning rules if we are always going to give a variance? Right now, that corner looks clean, it looks neat, it looks inviting. Every other business will then want a variance of 2 feet or more to encroach closer to the sidewalk. I really see, personally, no need for it.
Was there a part of your comments that you wanted me to? Was there a question that you wanted me to?
No, I
state-
took
or-
my tape measure.
Okay.
And I measured the Patel law sign, which is very neat, looks nice, it's inviting, it's in compliance. And I would like to see future signs in compliance with the zoning that we adopted several years ago for signage.
Go ahead.
Following up on that, if they put it at 8 feet, how close would it be to the building?
It would be very close to the building. The sign as proposed is close as it is as well, but the building was designed to be conforming with the front yard setback requirement along University Avenue. I believe that's 15 feet for B3s. So
Perhaps the applicants could do some calculations and respond.
Well, I'm looking at Exhibit E, and there's a 4-foot barrier all the way around there with a dotted line, and the sign is protruding into that right now. And I'm assuming to make it up to code that the edge of the south edge of the sign would have to be at the 8-foot mark, which would push it 2 more feet towards the building. And then you have your 6 feet, the sign 6 feet by 8, right? And to me, it'd almost be right up against the building, but that's just a visual thing, I think.
Several feet away. The building is 16.
Hold on, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We'll let you come up and speak. Wait. Anything further?
I guess they can't answer that, no. Close.
Thank you.
They designed that building, no one was.
Is there anyone who wishes to speak in favor of the application? So do you,
Yeah,
hold on. Go ahead.
I was just looking at this, and is what I see on here what's going to be permanently out there where it says Lindy Lou's Video Gaming Space for Rent Built to Suit? Is that always going to be on the sign?
well, the applicant will have a chance to
Oh.
answer that question. Just
I should
needs
also
to-
point out that we are not able to regulate content.
Well, no, I understand that, but, okay.
We're ready to hear from the applicant now. Please come forward. Sign in as well.
Yes, sir.
Please introduce yourself.
My name is Mark Allen. I'm one of the principals of Carmala LLC, the owner of the property. And I'd be glad to answer any questions. And I apologize for talking out of turn there. I thought that Ms. Pearson was asking for
Before
some
you,
clarification.
before you answer any questions, do you have any statement that you'd like to make, or you just want to answer the questions?
I'll just answer questions if I may.
Are there any questions for the applicant? Go ahead.
All right, so we can go with the sign, the distance from the street. So if it was 8 feet and you had 6 feet of the sign, that's 14 feet. How much left before you'd be to the building?
2 feet.
2 feet. And you feel that that's too close to the building, or why don't you want to just put it there?
We'd like to have it a little closer to the street because of the proximity of the building to the front, and in answer to Ms. Uckman's statement about the building next door, I believe their building, and I'm operating from memory, but I believe that building is much further back from the road. Because of the size of our property, in order to put anything there, we had to come as close to the, pardon me, the southern property line as possible. It's just a small lot. It's created a number of difficulties for us, and we've had, everything's worked out very well so far. This was just something we felt would help us promote the building. In answer to Ms. Chester's question about the bottom portion of it, we would put the tenant in the back. When we find one, we would put their logo on the bottom half.
That's right. I got it.
So the north half of the building, we are searching for a tenant for. So that's just space for lease.
Are there any further questions for the applicant?
Yes, ma'am.
I just had another one. If you're going to move, if you want to move the sign further to the east, does that have any, and it's closer to the road, does it become an issue with the line of sight for someone at the corner of, is that Lake Street?
Race Street.
Race, yeah.
We raised that issue with our engineers, Burns Clancy, and they said since it is an intersection with stoplights, that the vision triangle does not come into play at all.
Okay.
So we raised that issue. And if I can give a little background here into our request to move the sign 8 feet to the east, when we were originally approaching city staff about our signage, because we had 2 frontages, Race and University, we thought we were able to have 2 signs, and that's what we originally proposed. Ms. Pearson called me and said that staff would not support the possibility of 2 signs, one on Race and one on University, which we agreed to. We said if that's what staff wants, we've worked very closely with everybody in the city and had a very good relationship, good rapport, and everybody's been very helpful. When she said that staff would not support that, I said fine. This was simply the placement when we thought we were going to request a second sign. So with just one sign, we would like to move it 8 feet to the east to get it a little closer to the intersection.
I have another question. Will the sign be under the overhang, the eave?
It will, yes.
Okay.
That's how tight we are.
How wide is that eave?
3.5 feet.
Okay, so if it's going to be 2 feet from the building?
No, it'll be, let me think, we're 16 feet, 6 and 6. No, I guess it will not be underneath the eave. It'll be a little bit out from it.
So if it were to be 8 feet, then it would be partially underneath the eave.
That's correct, yes.
Any further questions from the applicant? Anything further you'd like to say, sir?
No, sir.
Thank you. Anything further from staff in light of the
I guess
questions or comments?
Just to correct the record, the reference to the law firm sign that is placed in front of their parking lot, not in front of the building. So I just wanted to clarify that it is in the grassy strip between the street and the parking lot, not between the building and the street. And the reference to the two signs, yes, you are correct. A corner lot with two frontages could have two freestanding signs. Staff would not have supported a variance for two freestanding signs on this lot. So I just wanted to make those two clarification points.
Thank you. Yes, go right ahead.
Are you able to talk at all about the rationale in staff having not wanted to support the two signs?
We felt because it was a small lot, it did warrant a variance request, but because it is a small lot, two signs at that location closer to the street would have been a bit too much to bear.
Anything further? Again, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any further questions or comments from any of the board members? And I believe we're ready to have this motion called as well. Yes.
Yes, I would like to move that we do not approve minor variance ZBA 2016 minimum dash 04 to allow a freestanding sign that encroaches 2 feet in the 8-foot setback.
Correct me if I am wrong. We can either not call it and have it die that way, but I don't think we can have a negative motion, I guess, called. I think people can vote against it, or it can die for lack of a motion in the second, correct?
Correct. It can die for lack of a second, or if someone wants to second it, then yes, you can vote it and vote as you see fit.
So again, my statement now is we are ready to call the motion. Is there a request?
She can make that. She needs to second her motion. She needs a second for her motion.
Or the chair can recognize that it fails as a...
Yeah. As I understand it, this one would have to be called and would die for lack of a second. I haven't studied my Roberts rules lately, but I don't think that the motion that...
Perhaps you can
Was-
just call for a second, and then...
All right. It's been moved that we deny the application in ZBA case 2016-minimum-04. Is there a second to that motion? Hearing none, that motion dies for lack of a second. Again, now I put forth, is there a motion to be made in request to ZBA case 2016-minimum-04?
Okay.
Go ahead.
I move that we approve ZBA case 2016-MIN-04. So where'd it go? How do you say it? With the following condition that the site be developed in general compliance with the attached site plan and rendering.
It's been moved. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that.
It's now been moved and second.
May I ask a clarification before the vote? I
Yes.
wanted to clarify that includes the site plan as amended, and we will have an amended version if that was the intent.
Oh, and as an, yes.
Okay, then why
Oh, the
why don't you
do it again.
do it again?
Okay. I move that we approve ZBA case 2016-MIN-04. With the following condition, that the site be developed in general compliance with the attached site plan and rendering, and that the sign be moved 8 feet to the east.
Okay, it's now been moved and slightly amended the motion. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I believe we're ready for a vote.
Ms. Utman?
Nay.
Mr. Warmbrun?
Yes.
Mr. Weiskopf?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Ms. Chester?
Yes.
And Ms. McLaughlin?
Yes.
That motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lost my place. Yes.
Why do we have a sign ordinance, or, because we don't follow it, we are always giving variances? And that corner, right now, is neat looking. Every other new building is going to request a variance, and it's going to become very sloppy. It's going to become an ugly corridor. I'm sorry. I've been to other communities where they have monument signs that look nice, they're inviting. Go down University Avenue, now it looks like, frankly, it's getting very trashy looking. I am sorry. I'm very disappointed. Excuse me, I don't feel well.
All right. I believe that this was raised, maybe not this exact question, but the issue of why don't we strictly comply with the zoning requirements? And I believe I told the questioner then that this body is called the Zoning Board of Appeals. It is our charge to consider appeals to the requirements of the zoning ordinance. We do not have to always approve those, but I believe, as I commented before, if that's how people feel, then I think they should take whatever steps necessary to put this board out of existence. But as long as we are in existence, I believe we must hear appeals. We don't always have to grant them, but I believe we must hear them. And that's all I have to say about that tonight. Is there any old business? Any new business? Any further audience participation? Hearing none. Is there a staff report? Study session? I believe we then concluded the business of this meeting, and I move that we adjourn. Thank you.